So picture this. You're walking through a neighbor's garden and you spot these bell peppers that are, literally the size of a man's fist. You know the exact ones I'm talking about. Thick-walled, deep green, hanging so heavy on the branch they look like they're just showing off. But then you go home to your own plants and, well, they're pushing out these sad, tiny little peppers that wouldn't even fill out a single sandwich. Welcome to this explainer. Today we are absolutely unpacking the exact step-by-step methodology for growing massive, thick-walled bell peppers, and we're pulling these methods straight from our gardening source material. So let's dive right in. It's a super frustrating situation, right? And it leads us to a really common question. Why exactly are your bell peppers so small? Honestly, if you've struggled with this, you've probably spent entire seasons thinking that the gap between your garden and that neighbor's garden was purely genetic. You might be sitting there assuming it requires, fancy hybrid seeds, some incredibly expensive greenhouse setup, or maybe just pure unadulterated luck. Well, let's just bust that myth right here, right now. According to the source material, we can totally toss out the ideas of genetics, better seeds, and luck. The reality, growing monster bell peppers isn't some huge mystery at all. It really just comes down to good, solid practice, executed at the exact right time. Once you actually understand what these plants are asking for, you're going to get those heavy, glossy yields you're looking for. So here's our roadmap for this explainer today. We're covering 1. The monster pepper myth, 2. Prepping the foundation, 3. Transplanting in depth, 4. Defeating the silent killer, and finally, feeding and spacing. We're going to take a fully chronological approach here, taking you straight from the soil prep all the way to the final harvest. All right, section 1, prepping the foundation, or as the source puts it, don't start a cold tractor. So before you even think about touching a plant, we have to talk about the soil. Bell peppers are what we call heavy feeders. They are going to demand a ton from your soil all season long. Think about it like this. You wouldn't fire up a cold tractor and put it straight to work without warming it up first, right? Well, planting is the exact same way. To warm up your garden's engine, wait about 2 weeks before transplanting and work 3 to 4 inches of aged compost into the top foot of your soil. And notice the emphasis on aged. Finished compost here, you want the dark, crumbly stuff that smells like a good forest floor. Definitely not raw manure. This basically loosens the soil structure so the roots can push down deep without fighting compaction. Plus, and this is huge, it feeds the microbial life. Those microbes are basically your silent partners. They break down nutrients and make them readily available to your plants. And speaking of making nutrients available, that brings us to what is easily the most skipped step in home gardening. Before you plant a single thing, you absolutely must test your soil pH. You are aiming for a highly specific window here. 6.0 to 6.8. If your soil is too acidic, you're going to need some garden lime. If it's too alkaline, you need sulfur. Look, a 5-minute test from your local co-op can literally save you an entire season of total frustration. Now you might be wondering, why is that 6.0 to 6.8 range such a big deal? Well, if you fall outside that range, you trigger something called nutrient lockout. Imagine you've got a massive tractor with a totally full tank of diesel, but the fuel line is completely clogged. That's nutrient lockout. The fuel, the nutrients, are sitting right there in the soil, but the plant's engine just can't get to them because the pH is wrong. Moving right along to section 2, transplanting and planting depth, featuring the sugar soak. You know, people tend to just shove stressed, droopy little plants directly into the dry dirt, and that causes transplant shock that literally costs weeks of growth. To prevent that, our source recommends a quirky but super effective procedure. It's called the sugar soak. Okay, first you fill a bucket with water, then add 1 tablespoon of plain white sugar to it. You soak the pepper root balls in there for 15 to 20 minutes right before planting. I know, it sounds a bit like an old wives' tale, right? But plants naturally produce sugar through photosynthesis. Giving them a direct hit of sugar in their water, it jumpstarts the engine. Those droopy seedlings will perk right up. And hey, while they soak, make sure to pinch off any dead or yellowing leaves. Dead foliage is basically just dead weight, pulling precious energy away from establishing those roots. All right, once they're all soaked and happy, it's planting time. And planting depth is where so many gardeners get completely tripped up. If you're used to growing tomatoes, you've probably heard you should bury them really deep, right? Because they grow roots all along their buried stem. Well, forget that for a second, because peppers are an entirely different animal. If you bury a pepper deep, you are basically sending out VIP invitations to devastating stem rot and fungal problems. You should only be digging holes about 6 to 8 inches deep, setting the plant so its first set of true leaves sits right above the soil line. Keep it shallow. But hold on, before that plant actually goes into the hole, we need to add some amendments. The source gives us 2 great options here. Option 1, a tablespoon of pure, untreated wood ash.
That stuff is absolutely loaded with potassium, which drives those thick fruit walls, plus a good dose of calcium. If you don't have wood ash laying around, option 2 is bone meal, which gives a huge phosphorus boost for early root development. Now pay close attention to this next part because it's absolutely critical. You must cover that fertilizer with about an inch of native soil before you actually set the plant in. You want those nutrients nearby in the root zone, sure, but if the roots sit directly on that concentrated stuff, they'll burn up before they even get started.
Okay, section 3, defeating the silent killer, also known as blossom end rot. So picture this. You've transplanted perfectly. The peppers are sizing up beautifully. And then, a dark, sunken, gross spot rots your most beautiful pepper from the bottom up. There is a massive misconception out there about this. Almost everyone thinks blossom end rot is a disease. It's actually not. It is a severe calcium deficiency within the plant. And the crazy frustrating part, your soil might actually be packed with plenty of calcium. But as we learned earlier, if your pH is off, the plant simply can't absorb it. The second huge cause, though, is inconsistent watering. Calcium actually physically moves through the plant with water. So if your soil goes through these harsh, wet, then bone-dry cycles, that calcium movement gets completely disrupted. So how do we fix inconsistent watering without spending a fortune on drip lines? Well, our source drops this heroic, literally zero-cost solution that solves almost every hydration problem you'll face with peppers. And it all starts with this one simple premise. Bury a container right next to your pepper plant about 6 inches away from the stem. So let's walk through how to actually build this DIY system. It's brilliant. You just grab an old plastic nursery pot or even a plastic bottle. You drill 10 to 15 holes all around the sides and the bottom. Then you bury that container right in the soil, about 6 inches away from the stem, leaving the room just poking above the soil surface. Now, when it's time to water, you don't splash the ground. You just pour the water directly into that buried pot. The water seeps out nice and slow, going straight down deep into the root zone without a single drop of runoff. And this perfectly highlights a fundamental rule of the pepper world. Dry leaves equal healthy peppers. These plants absolutely despise getting their leaves and stems wet. When you do surface watering, you inevitably splash the foliage, and that basically rolls out the red carpet for bacterial spot and fungal diseases. Plus, it creates this hard, crusty layer on top of the soil where water just evaporates into thin air. By watering deep through our buried pot trick, the surface stays completely dry, the leaves stay completely dry, and you actually force the plant to grow these incredibly deep, heat-tolerant root systems. It is a total game changer.
Which brings us to section 4, feeding and plant spacing, featuring a really cool bonus trick. Let's just map out the timeline of care we've built so far. We kicked off pre-planting with compost and pH balancing. Then transplant day hit us with the sugar soak and shallow planting rules. Now we are entering the absolute most crucial stage, flowering and fruiting. And during this time, the source drops a cheap, brilliant feeding trick: Epsom salt. All you do is dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt into a gallon of water, and then you just drench the soil around your plants with it once every 2 to 3 weeks. So what is the science behind this magic trick? Well, Epsom salt provides a massive hit of magnesium, and magnesium is literally the engine behind chlorophyll production. More chlorophyll means you get these super dark, lush green leaves, which allows the plant to convert sunlight into energy way, way more efficiently. And all that extra energy, that translates directly into vigorous growth, way better stress tolerance when the summer heat kicks in, and ultimately those giant, thick-walled monster peppers we've been chasing this whole time. Finally, one last, incredibly important detail to talk about: the actual geometry of your garden plot. Listen to me on this. Do not crowd your plants. The spacing rules for maximum yield are pretty strict. You want to plant them 18 to 24 inches apart, with a good 24 to 36 inches between your rows. If you cram them in together, they'll literally shade each other out. The lower leaves will stop getting light, they'll turn yellow, and they'll drop right off, completely draining your plant's energy. Proper spacing ensures every single plant gets its fair share of the sun and dramatically cuts down on disease by maximizing airflow right through the canopy. So there you have it. By executing these structured steps, from prepping that soil and dialing in the exact pH, to running the sugar soak, installing the buried pot watering trick, and finishing strong with the Epsom salt, you are completely eliminating the guesswork. Seriously, it's not magic. It's just about giving the plant exactly what it wants, right? Exactly when it needs it. So if you apply this roadmap starting today, it really leaves us with just one final question to ponder. Will you be the gardener everyone else is asking for advice this harvest season? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will catch you next time.